Thank you everyone for coming. Please, those of you who are still standing, please take your seats. Really a pleasure to see everybody here tonight for America Abroad Media's inaugural awards dinner. And it's such a terrific turnout, really with 3 fantastic honorees, as you know. Just a quick side announcement, I think your first courses have been served, so please start eating. I don't want to interrupt your dinner. You can begin. As you are all aware, this is the first dinner that we've done of this kind, and what a great way to begin it with these 3 honorees. The Nobel Peace Prize nominated International Center for Nonviolent Conflict, founded by Peter Ackerman, Academy Award-winning director Kathryn Bigelow, and acclaimed Indian actor and director Aamir Khan. We also have 4 fantastic co-chairs for this awards dinner, and I want to thank all of them for their help. India's Ambassador Nirupama Rao, former CIA Director General Michael Hayden, former Deputy Secretary of State John Whitehead, thank you for making the trip, and former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, Doug Wilson. I want to thank as well some of the lead sponsors without which we wouldn't be here tonight. BAE Systems, the Margot and Tom Pritzker Foundation, Turkish Airlines, and Bob Stewart and the entire Stewart Family Foundation. They've been longtime supporters. Thank you, all of you, for your help. And of course, if you have a chance, or if you've not yet, if you have a chance to take a look in your program journal, you'll see we have really a terrific host committee as well. I want to thank in particular Lester Crown, Michael Chertoff, Jim Glassman, Juan Zarate, and Tom Pickering for all of their help with this dinner. We at America Abroad Media established this award to honor exceptional media leaders who are willing to tackle serious issues of global importance, and who, through their integrity and creative ability, inform, inspire, and empower audiences around the world. Through different forms, our honorees tonight are all helping the media realize its true potential and fulfill its responsibility. In our first decade, we at America Abroad Media have tried to fulfill this responsibility as well by producing international affairs programming on U.S. public radio, by partnering as well with leading media channels in a critical part of the world, the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, to produce programs that help build civil society and connect people across borders. And I could tell you a lot more about this, but since we're a media organization, I'd prefer to show you our work. So here's a sample.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the first of a series of Pakistan-Afghanistan debates hosted by Tolo News in Kabul and Express News in Islamabad.
Hello from Istanbul. I'm Mithat Bereket from CNN Turk, and I do welcome you to this special program where we're going to be examining the relations between Turkey and the United States of America.
مشاهدي قناة حنبال، مرحبا بكم في لقاء مفتوح واليوم نطرق فيه للرشوة والفساد.
I'm Madeline Brand and you're listening to Egypt and the struggle for democracy on KCRW in Santa Monica. I'm joined by on-TV host Rami Radwan in Cairo.
From Islamabad to Istanbul, from Kabul to Cairo, America Abroad Media partners with leading channels in the region to produce programming that informs, inspires, and empowers.
ألا يمارس أي شخص عنده منظومة فكرية في ذهنه أو عنده فكرة، ألا يمارس حرية تعبير باش يحكي على معتقد متاعه. فإذا كان أنا في حديثي عن المعتقد متاعي تعتبره تبشير ونتعاقب عليه، خلينا نسأل رواحنا سؤال.
فأكيد شكلا حسينا جديد والجمهور حس جديد، وهذا اللي حاول يقوله لنا أو يوصله لنا، خاصة كما قلت إنه نوعا ما لأول مرة التجربة هذه تصير في تونس.
Unfortunately, the current generation of Afghanistan, we are the war generation. We have fantasies of how Afghanistan was in the 1970s and 60s, and we have heard it from our parents, but we haven't lived it. We haven't experienced it.
America Abroad Media works with prominent hosts to produce programming that helps their audiences better understand how the United States has grappled with the challenges of building its own liberal democracy.
So when you're providing a separation between, you're providing a freedom for religion. I've always written a freedom for religion provides the greatest energy for the civilizing of man.
And a documentary series hosted by leading Pakistani actress and director Reema Khan that explores her new home in America.
Living in Pakistan, I had many ideas about life in America. Some good, some bad.
सबसे पहले इंट्रोड्यूस किया डॉक्टर रहीम, हम पाकिस्तानी हैं, मुसलमान हैं और हम यहाँ रहते हैं। फिर उन्होंने कहा अब तुम्हारा मुल्क है, हमने कहा पाकिस्तान भी हमारा मुल्क है, अमेरिका भी हमारा मुल्क है। सबसे बड़ा मैसेज ये है कि जैसे आपकी दो औलादें होती हैं ना, आप एक को दूसरे ऊपर चूज़ नहीं कर सकते। हम उस तरह हैं, अमेरिका भी हमारा मुल्क है, पाकिस्तान भी हमारा मुल्क है।
My fans back in Pakistan see American life in a more realistic way, with greater understanding than before.
Here at home, we produce America Abroad, the only international affairs documentary on U.S. public radio.
After decades of war and 6 years of waiting, people across South Sudan are finally gearing up to vote.
I need to be free. Together, black people of Southern Sudan, we need to be a new country alone.
The series helps Americans understand the realities of a complex world and the need to engage it.
Why don't you push for sustainable solutions instead of food aid or another emergency's happened, so you're going to go to some part of the country where there is an emergency and you do an emergency stop, you know, another CNN moment. That's not development.
The father laid down as we stood around guarding, and the young boy, just mimicking him, went and laid down next to his father. I remember thinking how I would feel if I was the father, humiliated in front of my son. I'm made to look powerless. At that point, I remember thinking, we could lose this war if we forget that the winner is determined in the minds of the people.
In a globalized world, the media have a critical role to play in fostering more civil and pluralistic societies. America Abroad Media produces a diverse range of programming where it is needed most, always with a common goal: to better inform, educate, engage, and empower. For all of our audiences, partners, and colleagues around the world, this is America Abroad Media.
Thank you. I should note for our American audience, in the next year you'll be hearing a lot more town halls connecting America and the world for dialogue, broadcast on public radio stations around the country. We're also going to be launching a series of South Asia town halls connecting India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the U.S. For dialogue as well. So a couple of things to look forward to. And on that latter note, I'm really delighted that the great Pakistani actress Reema Khan, who you saw in the video, is here with us tonight. Reema, would you please stand? It's been great working with you. Thank you for being here. And I want to also recognize some of our other media partners who flew in to be with us here tonight, and I ask them all to stand as I call their name. Albert Shafiq, CEO of On TV in Egypt, one of the leading channels in that country, and with your colleagues as well, if you could please stand. Manika Arival, managing editor of NDTV from India, also a great channel. Third, the head of our office in Kabul, and one of many talented young Afghans today, Faridun Aryan. It's wonderful to see you, Faridun. Lastly, Greta Gatchebe, originally from Lebanon, now the head of our office in Tunisia. Greta, please. We're really blessed with excellent media partners, and that's what makes this work. And let me just close here before you continue with your dinners on a brief personal note. I'm a proud citizen of the United States. I've lived here 20 years. I got my citizenship about 5 years ago. I don't know if you could tell, but I was born and raised in Canada. And I mention this because I think it really says a lot about this country, because only in America could an organization like America Abroad Media be founded by a Canadian. So I'm always struck by that. So thank you everyone for coming. Enjoy your dinner, and I'll be back a little later and we'll commence the awards presentations. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Aaron Lobel.
hope you all have been enjoying your dinner, and I'd like to just begin the awards presentations now, if I may. You know, in the last century, millions of people around the world, from Poland to the Philippines, India, and South Africa, have used nonviolent struggle to demand and win their freedom. One of these struggles, the Indian independence movement, was analyzed in an 1,100-page PhD thesis written by a young graduate student named Peter Ackerman and advised by Professor Gene Sharp, who's the founding father of the field. Was the second longest, a little PhD trivia here anyway, second longest PhD thesis in the history of the Fletcher School of Law and Public Diplomacy, or Law and Diplomacy at Tufts. And the longest was from a grad student named Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Thought people might be interested. The thesis led to Peter's first book on nonviolent conflict, which unfortunately, as Peter says, sold only about 5,000 copies, and that included the 2,000 that he gave away. But then Peter discovered the power of film. In 2000, Peter turned his book into a documentary, collaborating for the first time with Steve York on a film called A Force More Powerful. The Emmy-nominated documentary was translated into 20 languages, was seen in more than 80 countries, and watched by more than 3 million people in the United States on PBS. Within days of the film's release, Peter began receiving dozens of calls, faxes, letters from activists around the world wanting to know how they could learn the same tools of resistance that was shown in the film. So to address what really was a cry for help, Peter established the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict to disseminate knowledge of nonviolent conflict to activists, as well as the media, policymakers, and scholars. And soon after that, Peter, again in collaboration with Steve York, released a second film. This was called Bringing Down a Dictator, about the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia. The film won a Peabody Award and was nominated for an Emmy. That was followed by their third award-winning film, The Orange Revolution, on the fraudulent 2004 elections and mass protests in Ukraine. The ICNC disseminates knowledge about nonviolent conflict in many different ways, and they were nominated for their work and its impact for a Nobel Peace Prize this year. Tonight, though, we're here to honor the ICNC, particularly for the power and impact of its films, which have informed and inspired so many. So here's a brief sample of their documentaries.
This is a chance to show the British, without having to hit them, to show them that we stand for something. We are not just slaves.
Unfortunately, the concept of nonviolence for many people is that you get hit on one cheek, you turn the other cheek, you don't do anything. But nonviolence means fighting back.
Management does not allow us to serve niggers in here.
Violence has a very simple dynamic. I make you suffer more than I suffer. That's what a war is. The difference with nonviolence is we don't want to beat the opponent up. We don't think that does any good.
It's mass action. And what do? You can't shoot all these people, you can't lock them all up.
To present the award to Peter Ackerman and the ICNC, I'd like to invite Steve Hadley to the stage, of course, National Security Advisor during George W. Bush's second term. And I know that Steve has worked closely with Peter at the George W. Bush Institute, particularly in their human freedom area of engagement. And they've had long-running discussions, I think, over the years on the issue of nonviolent resistance. So, Steve.
America Abroad Media tonight honors the ICNC for documentaries that demonstrate so vividly and so movingly the power of the human spirit and the universal hunger for freedom. Peter, your films have inspired men and women around the world. For people suffering under an oppressive regime, there comes a point where they conclude that the status quo is intolerable and they must take action. Success may seem impossible when they face a regime that's armed with the most lethal weaponry and willing to use these weapons against its own people. But your films show there is hope because the people can indeed be a force more powerful. And your films and the work of the Center show that peaceful civil resistance, as opposed to armed resistance, is both more likely to succeed and more likely to produce a stable democratic outcome. But success requires organization, clear goals, a sense of strategy, and raw courage. Peter has never been lacking in courage. Through every phase of his professional life, he has shown the same pattern. Learn the field of endeavor thoroughly and in depth. Develop a creative vision as to how to contribute to the field, and then pursue that vision with the determination and confidence of a born entrepreneur. Peter may not always have achieved the full measure of his visions, for Peter dreams big. But in the ICNC, he certainly has succeeded. Thank you, Peter, for helping American policymakers and the media better understand the dynamics of civil resistance. And thank you for the inspiring men and women around the world that you have inspired through these moving documentaries. It's my great honor and privilege to present you with this inaugural award from America Abroad Media. Peter, will you join us on the stage, please?
Steve, thanks so much for those comments. And many thanks to America Abroad Media for this wonderful award. And congratulations to my co-recipients, Kathryn and Aamir. I want to acknowledge all the international constituencies that actively support the mission of the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict, including veterans of past civil resistance campaigns, currently working with dissidents, academics doing cutting-edge research on nonviolent conflict, media professionals working with journalists to improve the accuracy of reporting on people power movements, policy analysts thinking through the implications of outside assistance for indigenous campaigns of civil resistance, as well as veteran diplomats and military officers trying to formulate professional standards of behavior in the midst of these conflicts. But a special recognition must be offered to Steve York, who you'll hear from shortly. Now, we've been partners for 15 years, and without his inspired filmmaking, the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict would never exist. Thank you again.
Kathryn, Bigelow is, in the words of our moderator, Ann Hornaday of the Washington Post, quote, a formidable filmmaker, as adept with human emotion as with visceral, pulse-quickening action. One member of our board of advisors, someone with a very distinguished career in national security, said, "I've never seen such honest and clear-eyed portrayal of war and counterterrorism. She's nailed it, and she's captured all that is essentially human about conflict in the way that she's done it." As many of you know, Kathryn is the first woman in history to receive the Academy Award for Best Director. She's the first woman to twice win the New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Director. And she was one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world in 2010. It's my hope, Kathryn, that this dinner, this visit, this reception, and this award will be memorable for you as well. In The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, you address critically important national security issues, and as Ann Hornaday writes, again quoting Ann, you do so without editorializing, with an approach that disposes of sentimentality and speculation, avoids axe-grinding rhetoric and posturing, and avoids triumphalist zeal. We at AAM want to honor you because we agree with that. And we believe that in so doing, you've made a real contribution to the quality of our public discourse. Before I turn to our awards presenters who will have more to say, here's a brief reminder of Kathryn's work with Zero Dark 30.
Can I be honest with you? I am bad news. I'm not your friend. I'm not going to help you. I'm going to break you. Any questions?
I want to make something absolutely clear. If you thought there was some working group coming to the rescue, I want you to know that you're wrong. This is it. There's nobody else hidden away on some other floor. There is just us. And we are failing.
You really believe this story? Osama bin Laden?
Yeah.
What part convinced you? Her confidence.
If you're right, the whole world's gonna win in on this.
You will never find him. He is one of the disappeared ones.
Kathryn, our dinner co-chair, former CIA Director General Michael Hayden, really regrets that he wasn't able to be here tonight, and he wanted to share some of his thoughts on your work. So here are his remarks.
Well, good evening, and first of all, let me begin by saying how honored I've been to be asked to be co-chairman of tonight's event by America Abroad Media, and I'm particularly honored to be here because we're going to present an award to someone I admire greatly, Kathryn Bigelow, the director of Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker. And my only regret is I'm not able to be there in person to help present this award, because I think Kathryn's work has been one of the highlights of American culture over the past few years. I'm particularly interested in her most recent film, Zero Dark 30, because it turns an uncompromising light on the agency and the people that I once led at the Central Intelligence Agency. Kathryn, let me just point out from the very beginning, me, people like me, the people I left behind at the agency are glad you made this movie. Now look, these were very difficult issues, but you handled life as realism. You handled life as complex. You went out and showed how difficult the work and how difficult the decisions were that had to be made in the hunt for Osama bin Laden. And you also gave the American people a chance to see that their intelligence services are actually pretty good at what they do, and that their intelligence services are made up of people just like them who share American values, but on whom we place great demands to show results. Now, I know, Kathryn, you were the first woman to receive the award for Best Director, so it should come as no surprise to me that you also pointed out that it was indeed a CIA band of sisters that did most of the heavy lifting in the analytical work that led us to Abbottabad and the killing of Osama. Well, I could say a lot more. Fundamentally, though, I just want to say thank you. And now I want to call on my good friend John Allen, General, United States Marine Corps, retired. John was the head of Marine Forces in Anbar Province, and later the head of American and international forces in Afghanistan. John, let me turn the stage over to you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply honored to be asked to present Kathryn Bigelow with this inaugural American Abroad Media Award. Kathryn, I'd like to reinforce what my friend Mike Hayden had to say about the honesty with which you portray the many anonymous public servants on whom your film and the film work that you have done concentrates, and the humanity with which you so rightly imbue them. That goes as well for the troops that you portray so well in The Hurt Locker. As warm-up for tonight, I watched that movie again last night, and I could feel the blistering heat of Iraq all over again and the enormous tension of mission accomplishment and the patrols that we went on. The young men and women that served in Iraq and in Afghanistan, with whom I had the great honor to serve, are today's greatest generation. They routinely display, and will continue to display, the courage and the honor, determination, intelligence, and leadership on battlefields that we know and battlefields yet to be seen. They are applying those same qualities today in the communities and towns around America to which they have returned. And several of these young veterans are with us here tonight, and I'll ask them to stand as I call their names. Former Congressman and Iraq War veteran Patrick Murphy. Bill McNulty, a Marine who returned to found Team Rubicon, which helped so many during Hurricane Sandy. Mike Breen, a former Army captain who now heads the Truman National Security Project. Mark Jacobson, who was one of my senior advisors in Afghanistan, who has both Army and Navy Reserve service. And Elliot Ackerman, former Marine Special Operator, an Iraq and Afghan veteran, former White House Fellow, and the son of Mr. and Mrs. Peter Ackerman, the AAM Award recipient tonight. Americans rightly take great pride in the accomplishments of these young men and women who have served so gallantly on distant and far-flung battlefields. They saw things, they did things that most Americans will never see or could even imagine. And many returned with seen, but also the unseen wounds of war. Their stories are often hard for them to tell and hard for most Americans to understand, and this has made the reintegration of our troops into their communities across the country more difficult than should have been the case. The Hurt Locker is not a documentary. It is a film, and it is art. Kathryn Bigelow allows the audience to make its own judgments, but she also gives her audience a true sense of what's behind the walls facing many of our precious young returning troops. So Kathryn, I join America Abroad Media in saluting you for bringing to public attention and discussion the unvarnished and unflinching portraits of our young men and women and what they must go through in war. I am pleased to present to you now the America Abroad Media Award.
Beyond humbled and honored to be standing here and certainly be in the company of Peter and Aamir and these extraordinary people who, all of you, and those that have served and those that have said such kind things like General Allen. Again, I'm just thrilled to be also associated with American Media Abroad and their incredible, thoughtful presentation of the and understanding of the Muslim world. So all I can say is what small contribution I've been able to make, I am completely, as Doug Wilson knows, I'm completely in shock, and I could not be more grateful. Thank you so very much.
The final award of the night to Aamir Khan will be presented by Doug Wilson, the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs and Senior Spokesman at the Pentagon. From his key role in the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell legislation, his work on behalf of military families and returning vets, and his past and continued mentoring of so many young men and women who have emerged as next-generation leaders here and abroad, making a difference has been a hallmark of Doug's career. And as a member of our Board of Advisors and tonight's dinner co-chair, Doug has certainly made a difference to us, and he's been instrumental in all aspects of this awards dinner. Doug, it's been amazing to work with you. You've been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and support.
Thank you. I don't know if Bill and Janet Cohen were able to make it tonight. If you are in the audience, very appropriate. I worked with Bill and Janet Cohen 10 years ago to establish the Leaders Project, which was designed to identify and bring together successor generation leaders from the U.S. and all across the globe and all walks of life to share their experience and expertise on topics of continuing bilateral and multilateral concern. And the meetings that we had came to be known as the White Oak Conferences, named for the Howard Gilman Foundation's magnificent White Oak estate in Florida, where they were held. In 2007, we decided to focus on the multiple facets of the U.S.-India relationship. We always included the arts in selecting our participants, and the former U.S. Ambassador to India, Frank Wisner, said, we should invite an Indian actor named Aamir Khan. He said he's a huge Bollywood star. And Frank told me, he said, it's very unlikely he will come, but he's the biggest thing in India. So we did. And a few weeks later, we fell out of our chairs because in the mail was a standard response form from one Aamir Khan saying he was coming and bringing his wife, Kiran Rao. We reached out to Aamir and we invited him to bring a film of his choosing, which we would show during the conference weekend, as we usually did with our arts participants. At the end of a very long day and a very staid set of conversations, all of the participants crowded into a very small room with a screen. The film Aamir had chosen was about 3 hours long, and we were starting this showing at 9:30 p.m. In addition, the theme of the movie, the plot theme, was the assassination of a defense minister. And so with Bill Cohen in the room as the co-host, I was very terrified that we were screwed. It was exactly the opposite. Rang de Basanti was the film, and everyone in the room was galvanized. And at 1 in the morning, government ministers, generals, admirals, business CEOs, top journalists, and NGO leaders were engrossed in by far the liveliest discussion of the entire weekend, led by one Aamir Khan. That film broke open the meeting. People realized that Aamir Khan had touched on the commonalities that connected everybody in the room. And the one that had the greatest impact was this: young people are responsible for their futures. They cannot outsource that responsibility. And for them to get the government they want, they have to be involved. That was my introduction to Aamir Khan, who has become a dear friend, along with his wonderful wife, Kathryn Rao. And they transformed a staid weekend conference into one in which people broke through barriers and connected. And as you'll see, this has been Aamir Khan's method of operation for quite a long time. Oscar-winning Indian composer A.R. Rahman wrote this about his friend Aamir Khan. In a world of false diplomacy and evasiveness, Aamir Khan is a straightforward man. Hundreds of millions in India and around the world would agree. Born in Mumbai, the film actor, director, and producer, who has become one of the leading figures of cinema, begins his film career as a child actor. With his first hit movie, Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak, Aamir Khan becomes a household name in scenes and songs that are still replayed throughout India. In 1996 comes Aamir Khan's first Filmfare Award for Best Actor in Raja Hindustani. In 2001, a second Best Actor award for Lagan. Lagan is nominated for Best Foreign Film at the 74th Annual Academy Awards. It catapults Aamir Khan into a star of international stature. And his star keeps rising. Rang de Basanti and another Filmfare Best Actor award. Aamir Khan's focus, revisiting India's struggle for freedom while challenging a new generation of Indians frustrated by government.
You're really sweet.
The comedy Three Idiots in 2009, which becomes the highest-grossing Bollywood film of all time. And in 2011, his home production, Dobigat, directed by his wife, Kathryn Rao. The film wins critical acclaim for its vivid exploration of the stunning and complex city of Mumbai. Aamir Khan's films are commercial successes, but they are much more than that. Khan's films display a sense of social responsibility, says his friend Rahman, always focusing on the issues which are his passions, education and malnutrition. In 2011, UNICEF appoints Khan an international ambassador to promote global awareness of child malnutrition. In 2012, Aamir Khan makes his television debut and Indian television history with Satyameva Jayate. Part journalism, part talk show, Tens of millions watch weekly as the program confronts India's deepest social ills, from sexual abuse to caste discrimination.
आदाब, खुशामदीद, सत्यमेव जयते। मैं आमिर खान आप सभी का तहे दिल से इस शो पर स्वागत करता हूँ।
In its 2012 cover story on Khan's quest, Time magazine declares he is breaking the Bollywood mold by tackling India's social evils. His friend A.R. Rahman responds best. He uses his gift as a charmer to give his audience the most bitter medicine. Hypnotized, we take it without complaint. That's Aamir's magic at work.
Are you encouraging children to question?
By showing the courage to ask the hard questions, Aamir has started a movement that will help change the world in which Indians live. Tonight, America Abroad Media welcomes Aamir Khan, Kiran Rao, and their son Azad. Aamir, for bringing so many important issues into mainstream India through your seminal film and television work, Jai Ho. Come on up, come on up. Aamir, my friend, it is now with great love and great pride, but most of all, with the greatest respect for your ability to show people, not just in India, but in places like Pakistan and Afghanistan, places where America Abroad Media does its work, and really all over the world, to show people the obstacles to their common humanity so that they can work together to remove them, that I have the pleasure to present you with the inaugural America Abroad Media Award.
Stand right over here.
Thank you, Doug, for those really kind words. It's a real honor to be here, and I'd like to thank America Abroad Media for this honor, for recognizing the work that we've started in our country. And I had no idea, actually, that the work that we've started back home in India would interest someone outside of India, but I'm really pleased to know that and honored to know that. And I share this honor today with the team that has worked with me to make this possible. And I'd like to take two names here, my director, Satyajit Bhatkal, and the co-director and the head of research, Swati, without whom this just wouldn't have been possible. I must say here that this journey of mine, which began roughly maybe 4 years ago, has been one of the most enriching journeys of my life, and something that I've learned a whole lot from. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, now it's time for us to hear more from the honorees. So it's great for me to be able to call up, as I said earlier, the moderator, really for this evening's discussion, Ann Hornaday, the film critic of the Washington Post, and welcoming again our honorees, Aamir Khan, Kathryn Bigelow, and Steve York, the filmmaker behind the ICNC's documentaries. So please, welcome back.
I assume he turned it on. Anyway?
I like it. Boy, girl, boy, girl. Good evening. Congratulations, you three. Thank you. For a much-deserved honor. Can everybody hear me? You'll let me know. Let's dive right in. You're all here. You're coming from such diverse parts of the film world, formally and in content. But I think you're all here, and we're all honoring you tonight because of values. Each of you in your work is transmitting important values about humanism and democracy and empowerment and engagement. And I wanted to ask, and Steve, I'm going to put a pin in you for a moment, and I'm going to ask Aamir and Kathryn first. When do values come into the work for you? Do you start with an idea of the values you want to transmit in a particular piece? Or when in the process does it come in?
I'm not quite sure. Actually, when I began thinking of doing this show, it was, like, I can't put my finger on when it started. Because it's something that grew in my head for many years. I kept getting uncomfortable about what I read in the newspapers every day. And I didn't know how to help and how to contribute. It would trouble me for years. And then one day, a friend of mine who heads a big television network came to me and said, I want you to do a game show for my television channel. So I said, I'm not really interested in a game show, but I would like to do something which has the potential of having strong social impact. And there's something in my head that's been cooking, and I would like to try that. And that's how it began for me. I think perhaps the values that we are speaking of is somewhere embedded in it right from the very start. And we're trying to approach each of these issues because the fact is that back home in India, each one of us is responsible for the way things are. And this is a show which we're trying to do with love. It's not with anger that we're doing this show. Me and my team is trying to approach the show with love because we feel that we are part of the problem and we're also part of the solution. And we need to find that. We need to find that. We need to question ourselves. We need to look inside as opposed to pointing outside. And that's the basis on which we work. Sorry, the two bases that we work on is love and hope, because when we research topics, we feel so hopeless at times when we go through the material. And that's one thing that is very important to us in the show, is that we look towards each of these topics and ourselves as a society with hope and love. Hope becomes a very important ingredient of it.
Film is can be such a powerful medium. It's such a kind of very pervasive and can really work on the subconscious. And I think that all the more reason to be very aware of the content that you're putting in the film, and exactly what Aamir has been speaking about is that, hope and love, that the content is profoundly important, and the impact that film can have is, I think, profoundly important. And that's why, for me, I suppose it's the opportunity to make a work that has some social responsibility, in addition to being accessible and somewhat entertaining, but or experiential, I like to say, or think, putting the audience in the shoes of, for instance, a particular EOD tech. But the kind of idea of social responsibility, I think, is what really moves me, and is a very galvanizing feature that I think film can possess.
This sort of leads into another way of putting that question, and Steve, now I'll put the question to you, but it's the question of audience, because I think each of you're all going toward different audiences, and in some cases I think you're going to multiple audiences at once, and it's almost like four-dimensional chess in terms of all these constituencies that you're communicating with. But Steve, can you talk a little bit about, do you have a specific audience in mind when you're making your documentaries?
Yes and no, but I don't think that audiences need to be perceived as Kathryn has one audience and I have another. I feel that what we do, or that any of us, I mean, what we want to do, I think I can say this, but I'm speaking just for myself, I want to be universal. I want to touch something in anyone who happens to see this, and I don't want to do anything at the start or at any point during the process that would limit that audience or that appeal. In the case of the work that I've done with Peter Ackerman, the first project began without a title, without any characters, and with no script. We simply had a mandate to explore the phenomenon of nonviolent conflict. Nowadays, we tend to call it civil resistance, but in those days, we said, and if somebody asked me socially during that time what I was working on, I could pretty much guarantee that I'd get a response of a kind of puzzlement, almost a, you know, you're dealing with something that's a contradiction in terms. Nonviolent conflict. Very quickly, my staff, crew, and I, within a matter of a couple of days, had resolved for ourselves that what we were doing was making a series, it was 3 hours on PBS, about power. It's hard to define something in terms of what it's not. To say that it's nonviolent is not to say what it is. But we were making films about power, about how is power defined? How do you get power? How do you use power? And seen in those terms, we were in a whole other, and then the second thing is that I don't think any film succeeds if there's not a story. I mean, the strength of narrative, in a way, is what we do have in common. Maybe some technology, you know, that's not that different. We're both shooting digitally these days. But the idea that it's not unlike being the old guy who's sitting around the campfire centuries ago telling a story. It's storytelling. It's the ability to choose events, put them in a certain order, decide how long each section of it gets, you know, 3 minutes on the screen, 30 seconds on the screen, and to make sure you have characters which will pull you in. And in that sense, I'm a little resentful of people who talk about film and reserve the use of the term narrative for films with actors and scripts. It's true, I start without actors and no script, and I have to, in effect, find my characters who are real people. But in the end, if they're any good, and if they reach people, they're narrative. Right. They're driven by strong stories and strong characters.
Right. I completely agree with
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I wanted to get into this a little later, but maybe, but I still want to ask, especially Kathryn, about the audience question. But just these lines are blurring every day between narrative, documentary, fact, fiction, faction. I mean, Kathryn and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, what do we even call these new hybrids of fact-based dramas? But I want to get to audience, especially Kathryn, with your work, because it seems to me that your movies obviously appeal to a broad, general, movie-going audience here in America. But I think what a lot of us American filmgoers forget is that they're also going out to the rest of the world. And especially with such potentially inflammatory material as The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30 contain, I wonder how much that's in your mind as you're putting these narratives together. And then you have another constituency of stakeholders, who are the military people and families that you're portraying in these films and have often consulted with in researching them, so you're accountable to them. So it seems like you're having to sort of operate on all these different levels.
Very wonderful question. I think, I mean, what motivates me is stories, or rather a question to which I don't know the answer. In other words, how did they find and, you know, what happened at the compound in Pakistan that night of May 1st, 2011, and how did, in Iraq, what is a day in the life of a bomb tech? And, you know, starting with questions for which, you know, perhaps selfishly I want to know the answers. And then I think that kind of informational gap, I think then, for me anyway, can help the material be a little bit more relevant, a little bit more topical. Now, asking a question about the audience, I mean, I suppose, again, I sort of use myself as a bit of that sort of litmus test that I think we're all hungry for information. I think that, I think especially now, especially with, I don't know, so many kind of pockets of sort of unrest all over the world, I think the hunger for information is really acute, and that's a real, like certainly in your work and in your work, you're really feeding that appetite, and I think it's really extraordinary. I think it's a real positive sign, that people are hungry for that.
Were there moments when, in either the Hurt Locker or Zero Dark 30 or both, that you, when you thought of it going into a global market, or especially Muslim communities, that it could have been potentially inflaming or inflammatory? I mean, was that ever a consideration?
Well, I have to say that having shot over there, we were very sensitive to the sensitivities, and on the other hand, again, we were following a true story within the context of a narrative feature fiction film. So, I think that to the extent that the events had happened, and certainly after the death of Osama bin Laden, that information was disseminated to the world, and this was a recreation of that information. So I think that you could look at that as a kind of, I suppose, as an opportunity to test the waters in terms of what would happen.
Now, again, you're all in some way, you're dealing with facts. You're coming at facts at different levels. Steve, you're working in the classical documentary, although I take your point that these distinctions are increasingly meaningless. Aamir, you've, as we saw in the clips, for years you worked, I would say, in the realm of allegory. You were creating dramatic allegories to explore these issues that concerned you about India. And then in recent years, you've chosen to go into this fascinating talk show format. What led you to go in? Well, you said you were approached by the head of the Star Network, but clearly this was a format that you felt.
Well, I felt that if I really want to take issues which affect most Indians, and I want to try and first understand them and then share them, I needed a platform that's really powerful. And I felt television was that platform. Because in India, back home in India, every home has a television almost. So I wanted to use the power of that medium of television. And I wanted to combine it with what I thought my abilities were, which is in storytelling. And I completely agree with Steve that though this was a talk show, and so in that sense this was not fiction, but we went through all the paces of fiction, which means we collected information which was real, which was true. It was hard research done on every topic, but we decided how to present it. It was very important to decide how to present it so that we could reach an audience and touch their hearts. I don't simply want to give out information. No, I want to affect you. I want to change. I want to question the way you think. I hopefully want to change the way you look at something. So for that, storytelling is a very important aspect of that. And the characters that when we speak of characters, while they're not fictional characters, I've got real characters to play with. I've got real life heroes who I can put in front of you, whom we can get inspired from, who we can learn from. So the attempt was to use the powerful platform of television, combine it with storytelling, so to speak, the abilities that I come from, and see if we can, tackle these issues in a manner that they can touch our hearts. And that's why I chose television. Well, in India, it's slightly more complex because it's a country of multiple languages. So when I spoke to Uday, who's the head of Star Network, and I told him about this program, a year later after he offered me the game show, I said, listen, I need to do something else. So for a year and a half, I researched on 3 topics: healthcare, child sexual abuse, and female feticide. And after I was sure that we have a show on hand, I spoke to him again and I said, there are 3 things I require from you. for me to be able to do the show for you. And he said, what are the three? I said, first of all, I want this in multiple languages. Because India is a country of languages, and I don't want to leave anyone out. I want to reach out from my side to everyone. And I want you to promise me, while your network is huge and you have multiple languages in your network, I want you to promise me that in those regions that your network is not the leading network, you will give this show to your competitor. Now, that's a tough one. To his credit, he did not hesitate. He said yes. The second condition I put, or request I put to him, was that I want this to go day and date. By the way, this is day and date in these 8 channels. I said I want to go day and date on our national terrestrial channel, which is in fact a competitor to him in any case. But the reason I wanted to go to the terrestrial channel was that while Star is a satellite network and reaches approximately 70% of the country, it's only DD which reaches the remaining 30%. And I didn't want to lose even the remotest village in India. And the third was that I wanted this on a Sunday morning, which is considered graveyard time in India. Nobody in India watches television on a Sunday morning. So I was asking him for 3 things that none of which he wanted to really. But to his credit, he agreed to all 3 of them. And the reason I wanted graveyard time, Sunday morning time, was because I didn't want people to consume the show or look at the show while they're flipping through news and sports and their favorite soap opera and a game show and a reality show. Sunday morning means either you decide to watch my show and watch it, or you decide not to watch it and then you don't watch it. But you don't consume it while flipping through 20 things. I wanted the audience to take one step towards me and show me that much of a commitment, which I'm happy to say they did.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Steve, I was interested in watching A Force More Powerful that it's narrated by Ben Kingsley, who in the first part, as you saw in the clips, is this really effective chapter about Gandhi. So here we have the dramatized Gandhi narrating the documentary about Gandhi. Can you talk a little bit about those 2 forms? Yeah. I know I'm making a distinction you don't approve of.
No, that's all right. I have to say, working with Ben Kingsley was wonderful. He's a brilliant guy. Just spend time around him, and altogether I was, 2.5 days. But it was as if the fact that he had played Gandhi in the famous Attenborough film had never happened. It just never came up. To the extent that it did, I think one day over lunch, we took a break recording. He said, I made no effort whatsoever in playing Gandhi to develop or put on an accent. I spoke that character just as I'm speaking to you now, which I hadn't been aware of or even thought about when I watched the film. But it was right for him to do it that way. I think the problems of doing a film about Gandhi as a person and about his life in a nonfiction situation, quite honestly, you have to deal with some things that are quite unfilmmaking kinds of things. Like, is there any footage? Is there in the archives any actual film of this man? If so, how much? What if there's some very, very important thing that happened in his life or in his struggle for independence for which there is no footage at all? What am I going to do about that? And then you begin thinking, well, I can narrate some of this, perhaps using scenes that I could shoot today. Those kinds of things, ways I can interview people. I found 2 people, maybe 3, in India who were alive and could speak coherently on camera in the form of interviews, which I don't like to do. I think interviews are awful, and my basic rule in recent years is don't interview anyone unless they were either an eyewitness to the events or a participant in the events. You know, I don't want academics, people whose knowledge of the subject is based on study or reading or purely academic. I think the other problem is very much related to the issue of truth and truthful films, and documentaries are pretty much considered, I suppose, by most audiences to be factual. On the other hand, you're working on films largely, the most important ones recently, which are based on fact, and you can't deviate too much from that because your audience has already read it in the front page of the paper in the evening news. But think about it. You're talking about a story, and let's take Gandhi, whose career as an activist fighting for Indian independence stretched decades. It even started when he was still working in South Africa. In your case, the quest to find bin Laden was 7 years, 8 years? I can't remember. 10, sorry. You've got nominally in a feature film 2 hours, 2.5 hours, maybe 3 tops. Yeah, so you're compressing a story. You have to make choices. Out of all the scenes that took place in those 10 years, which ones are you going to put on the screen in your 2.5 hours?
And not only that, but I wanted to get to this too, that with this, and you're at the forefront of this really exciting aesthetic movement of fact-based dramas, Kathryn, where I think you're working, you and Paul Greengrass is another example, you're working at such a high functioning level in terms of the formal issues. But in a way, you're setting up expectations so high that when you're that close to when you are that close to the truth and the facts, any deviation, any liberty, it seems like people are more, prone to pounce. So are you setting, how do you navigate that tension? Are you setting yourself up?
Well, I suppose it goes back to storytelling. Finally you're telling a story that is its antecedents are in fact, but you are compressing 10 years into 2.5 hours, and you're compositing characters. So it's not a documentary. And I think though, what's interesting is you are kind of navigating a very fine line because it can sometimes feel very real, and it can feel very experiential, and you think, well, wait a minute, I'm there, those people really exist. And also I tend to not work with a lot of known actors, so you don't necessarily come, you don't come to that particular character having a previous understanding of that character in a different movie. So that person is actually fresh and new to you on that screen in that, performing that function. And I think that creates a kind of tension, actually, that perhaps contributes to the, I suppose, to the feeling of authenticity. But nonetheless, I think you have to make very calculated decisions. You have to, be as authentic as you can within the confines of telling a story that is, in fact, at the end of the day, it's 10 years compressed into 2.5 hours. So you're making, multitude of decisions to try to compress that information.
Right. Well, I'm getting the hook. I'm afraid this discussion has come to an end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations again. Thank you all.
Thank you, Aamir, Kathryn, Steve, and for a great discussion. We're going to conclude our program, and I just want to give a couple more special thanks, if I could, to the entire team at America Broad Media, led by Schaefer Bush and Philippa Levenberg. They really worked incredibly hard on this inaugural awards dinner. You were fantastic. Thanks as well to Linda Webster and the Webster Group for their help on this dinner. Of course, our honorees for all the work that they've done. And if I could, just my own special thanks, most special thanks to my wife, Essen, who helped me launch this organization. There were no staff and there were no grants at the beginning. And some of you may have noticed, she's due with our second child in 17 days. So now that the dinner is ending, the contractions begin, I guess. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good night.